Housekeeper, I've invited some celebrity friends over, so entertain them. My snobbish mother-in-law, who fancies herself a celebrity, declared loudly. Her condescending tone looked down on me. Neither this high-rise condo we're living in, nor the coffee set she boasts about as her own, actually belong to her. My sweet-natured husband, who seems a bit naive, doesn't seem to realize her malice. Exhausted from being at her beck and call, I have no choice but to comply helplessly. Why is this person even here? What? The moment she saw me carrying the coffee and snacks, my mother-in-law's proud celebrity friends started trembling. Ignoring my confused mother-in-law, we were all stirred up. Amidst the commotion caused by my unexpected true identity, my husband casually started talking, and that greatly altered my mother-in-law's fate. And the person who delivered the final blow to her was someone unexpected. It was surprising that such an ending awaited us. Even if I could rewind time and relive this day, it would have been unpredictable for me. I am Molly, a 45-year-old housewife. I've been married to my husband Alex, who is the same age, for 19 years. We've just moved into what you might call a high-rise condo. Having finished unpacking, we're enjoying our new life. After our child left home for college, it was the perfect opportunity for Alex and me to move into a condo of just the right size. Indeed, it's a fine high-rise we splurged on the rent for, quiet with good sunlight and a comfortable environment. We also bought some small furniture better suited to our new place and some stylish dishes we had been longing for. It's delightful to see the space gradually reflect our taste. That pleasant life was disrupted by a single phone call. Hello, Molly? Congratulations on moving into the new place. I want to celebrate, so I'll come over now. My mother-in-law, who lives with my brother-in-law and his wife, had heard about our move and decided to visit us. I managed to respond pleasantly enough, but internally, I was screaming. I find my mother-in-law a bit difficult to deal with. Not so much because of our relationship as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but because of her personality. She boasts as if everything is her accomplishment. I'm not particularly fond of that. She continually seeks to dominate and speaks condescendingly. Mom coming over to celebrate our move is kind of nice of her, isn't it? My husband, blissfully unaware, took her words at face value. I sighed. It's just for a short time, I can endure it and hope nothing happens. As I prayed that my unease was unfounded, I waited for my mother-in-law to arrive. Oh my! What a beautiful home! When she arrived, she was as excited as a child. This house uses a remote system to unlock the entrance door when guests ring from the intercom in their condo. I was surprised by how eagerly she approached the intercom camera, but her cheerful demeanor wasn't bad. Just when I thought maybe we could end this visit on good terms, she suddenly said, "Let's have dinner delivered or go out tonight. By the way, it's currently 10 a.m. Talking about dinner plans this early is a bit much." It seems she intends to stay at least until dinner. The thought of her possibly planning to stay overnight made my cheeks twitch. She didn't say she's staying overnight, did she? Well, if it comes to that, I guess she can sleep on the mattress we keep for when guests visit. My husband is adorably naive but sometimes painfully oblivious to malice. Even when he is the target of harassment, he doesn't realize it and keeps smiling. I'm more sensitive by nature, so his magnanimity often surprises and attracts me. But this time, it's just too much for me. Even if my mother-in-law acts all high and mighty again, I doubt my husband, Alex, will even bat an eye. After all, the person in question is his mother. To him, she's the mother he grew up with and became fond of until adulthood. Unless I complain about how much I dislike it, it seems better to assume that no help will come from him. My mother-in-law arrived pulling a suitcase. What she handed over as a celebration was snacks worth about $10. As soon as I made coffee and opened the box, my mother-in-law started munching on the sweets before we could. Amazing, really impressive. Alex is so respectable, to be able to buy a place like this. I'm so proud, she said, tilting her chin up and flaring her nostrils. A perfect boastful face. If this were an audition for a mean role like Cinderella's mother, she'd pass instantly. "We didn't buy it, it's rented thanks to Molly," my husband responded, tilting his head. That statement was spot on. Despite being a high-rise condo, this place is a rental. "Oh wow, Alex is so great. Come on, Molly, take out the trash, quickly." No sooner had she praised my husband than she turned a stern face towards me. She seemed to be telling me to throw away the wrappers of the sweets we had finished eating, which were on the table. I gathered and threw away the trash while feeling a bit annoyed. The trash can is in a noticeable place, she could do it herself. Or at least she could say, "Please throw this away," but being ordered around like this was unpleasant. Afterward, my mother-in-law kept giving me orders at every turn. "Bring this, clean that up," treating me almost like a servant. Initially, I endured it and served the meal as told, but my mother-in-law started to push her luck even more. "This is greasy, isn't it? Aren't you cleaning? I've been here since this morning and haven't seen you clean once. You're pretty much the maid of this house, aren't you? Get to work." Usually, I'd clean any time. It's one of the household chores I actually like. The only reason I hadn't done it yet was because she was here as a guest. Or maybe she really did think I was the maid. I was about to talk back but swallowed my words. She was supposed to leave soon anyway. It's more energy efficient to just let things slide than to create a fuss. The sneaky part about my mother-in-law is that she hardly says these things in front of Alex. When he's around, she praises him in a cutesy voice and spends her time having fun. She's utterly mean-spirited, and it's so annoying. However, things took a turn for the worse after dinner. My mother-in-law announced she was staying over. Alex's face turned serious for a moment, then he chuckled and whispered to me, "I'm sorry, Molly, I'll talk to her later. Can you endure it just for tonight?" I'm weak to this expression with his eyebrows furrowed. I resigned myself to it and quietly prepared the bedding. As I was laying out the mattress on the hardwood floor, my mother-in-law suddenly appeared nearby. "Directly on the floor? Don't you have a rug? The stores are still open, go buy one," she commanded in a snarky tone, completely different from when she's in front of Alex. Utterly unpleasant, yet I responded in as kind a voice as I could. "It's just for one day, please bear with it. Our place is all hardwood floors." I even added a smile, but it didn't seem to open her heart. My mother-in-law glared at me with contempt. Thinking about how much it bothered her to lay the mattress on the floor, she snorted and said, "Planning to kick me out in one day? I'll be staying for a few days. I want to meet the celeb neighbors too." I was taken aback. I kept my strange smile and rushed back to Alex. "Alex, your mom says she's staying for a few days. Can you ask her to go out while I'm working or at least keep quiet?" Alex looked a bit surprised as our eyes met. Actually, I write a blog as a hobby and do a bit of work from home. It's clear that my activities would be disrupted while my mother-in-law is here, and I really wanted to secure some time for myself. My husband, Alex, nodded strongly and spoke to my mother-in-law. "If you're staying, please don't disturb Molly's work. It's important work. Why don't you go shopping or take a walk during the day?" To this, my mother-in-law cheerily responded, "Yes, yes." Her overly cheerful demeanor actually seemed suspicious. I sincerely prayed she wouldn't do anything unnecessary. However, in the following days, my mother-in-law was completely inconsiderate. Take the laundry, for example. She would leave it out every night and get angry if it wasn't washed by the next morning. I felt sad wondering why I was washing her underwear while being mindful of noise for the neighbors. "Make sure to wash these in a laundry net. They are my delicates," she demanded harshly. Reluctantly, I put them in the net, realizing none of the clothes seemed delicate. Her promise not to disturb me during the day seemed forgotten. Instead of going out, she ordered me around to do her shopping. "You told me to buy juice, and you bring back this sugar water? Who buys anything but 100% fruit juice when their husband's parents are visiting?" With that, she swept the bottle off the table. The sound of the liquid splashing was frustrating after I had hurried to buy it. My mother-in-law continued to press. "Hurry back and get the right one, you're really slow. Didn't I tell you? A daughter-in-law is just like a maid. Don't you get it yet? I'll throw you out of this house." Silently, I turned on my computer. I thought I couldn't deal with her anymore. "I'm sorry, but I have urgent work to do. The supermarket is right outside. Could you please buy whatever you like yourself?" While spewing unbearable complaints, she eventually left the house. Finally alone, I started to calm down in the quiet. She would only be here for a few more days. I kept telling myself to endure it. When she returned, she was holding a bottle of wine, not juice. For a moment, I thought, well, alcohol is unavoidable. If you're going to enjoy some wine, please have some of this cheese as well. Alex bought it on a business trip, and it's really tasty. I offered her some rather expensive cheese, and visibly, her mood improved. My mother-in-law didn't seem to have any plans to leave even after a week. Furthermore, she started greeting the neighbors on her own. She lingered in front of the elevator, chatting up everyone she could. When Alex told me about her behavior, I was mortified. I told her to stop lying in wait, but she's excited about meeting the neighbors. Maybe it's time for a tough approach. Both Alex and I, enduring her stay, were reaching our limits. On the 9th day of her stay, my mother-in-law suddenly brought guests home. It seemed she had set her sights on Madison, particularly refined and wealthy residents. She acted as if they were friends, even linking arms. When I heard my mother-in-law call her by name, I realized it was Madison, but these were strangers to me. Since I was in my house clothes, I hurried to the kitchen to escape, letting Alex handle the guests. Mom's acting like she's friends with the celeb crowd, sucking up to Madison as if she rented this high-rise herself. I wish she'd stop. Alex came to the kitchen to report and shrugged his shoulders. Moreover, my mother-in-law had even declared she was throwing a party. I was thoroughly disheartened. Then I heard my mother-in-law's voice. "Housekeeper. I've invited some celebrity friends, so entertain them." I was just so tired. I didn't have the energy to resist and began preparing the coffee. Alex quietly brought me a change of clothes. At least changing into these would spare me the embarrassment of being seen in my house clothes. I placed the coffee set and some store-bought baked cakes on a tray and brought them out to the guests. "Why is this person here? What?" As soon as Madison saw me bringing the coffee and snacks, she started trembling. Behind her, the rest of Madison's family appeared excited, each gesturing animatedly. My mother-in-law was shocked to see her proud celebrity friends suddenly change their demeanor. "Wow, hey, the real Molly, right? I always read your blog. I'm a fan. I watch your streams too." Madison stood up and reached out to shake my hand. Blogging and streaming are hobbies of mine that also connect to my work. Madison's family were my readers. Since I showed my face online, they recognized me immediately. My mother-in-law doesn't watch blogs or videos, so she looked puzzled. "Well, thank you. I'm glad you read it," I said with a beaming smile. Actually, my blog is quite popular, especially among homemakers. Sometimes people recognize me and speak to me when I'm shopping, but I had no idea there were readers in the same high-rise. "Amazing! The real deal! So classy!" Leaving my bewildered mother-in-law behind, Madison was thrilled. I calmly tried to settle her down with a modest smile. Seeing how delighted she was, I poured the coffee carefully, wanting her to enjoy a proper cup. I also put out not just the baked cakes, but some dried fruits. Madison added some delicious canellas she had brought to the table. Thanks to the splendid array of sweets, the atmosphere quickly became lively. We were excited, leaving my mother-in-law, who was clueless about the internet, out of the loop. Alex noticed the change in the air and joined us with a smile. "I saw the notice that you couldn't stream this week because of overnight guests and was really sad. But, wow. Kathy is the guest? What? Why can't you stream then?" Adults can wait quietly during a stream, right? I thought you might have small children visiting. At her words, Madison's family chuckled. My mother-in-law, noticing the disdainful looks around her, turned bright red and looked down. Actually, I am also known as a charismatic home management blogger. I share tips on housekeeping and organization, and my content is popular across several generations. I started social media recently and have begun streaming directly with my readers due to their requests. However, my planned streams were disrupted because Kathy kept interfering. Kathy really knows little about the internet, and the chance of her finding my social media is almost zero. So, I wrote a slightly vague post. I had an overnight guest and couldn't stream as planned. I'm really sorry to those who waited. Because, well, the guest gets upset if I don't take care of them. Of course, I didn't show my mother-in-law's face, and I made it somewhat humorous to not paint her as a complete villain. But anyone seeing both the situation and my social media would understand how Madison and the others might feel. Next to speak was Alex. Wow, Madison also read Molly's blog, thank you. She's publishing a book soon, and my publishing company is handling it, so please look forward to it. My mother-in-law looked shocked at Alex. She hadn't heard anything about this. I hadn't told her because in the past, whenever I shared good news, she would get upset, accusing me of bragging. So I had chosen not to mention it this time. It's one thing to be seen by chance, but I thought there was no need to go out of my way to tell and be disliked on purpose. It's actually because I'm working on the book right now. I told Mom not to disturb Molly's work. It's not okay to interrupt the stream. If Molly's book gets delayed, I'll get in trouble since I'm in charge of it. My mother-in-law let out a small huh and shrank. She probably never imagined that I was working with my husband. Alex then innocently started bringing up Kathy's behaviors. Speaking of which, Mom, you said something funny yesterday. Why don't you include that in the book as a family episode? Remember when you said the tomato sauce Molly made yesterday was sour and must be spoiled? You're such a funny mom. Madison's family burst into laughter. I just looked down, feeling I shouldn't laugh. But Alex didn't stop. You were saying you're a celeb because you're staying in a high-rise condo, even though you're just visiting. Saying you indulge in luxurious while drinking liquor store wine, I'm tempted to point out that's quite plebeian. I thought about calling it a charming anecdote, but I stopped as Kathy's complexion went from red to almost black. Apparently, the episode was too trivial for Madison, who only offered ambiguous smiles, looking back and forth between Alex and Kathy. Let's change the subject. By the way, Madison, I see you're using that bag. Madison had used the bag, which was from a collaboration with a magazine I had supervised, to carry the Keneal box. When I changed the subject, Madison's expression brightened immediately. Yes, the bag designed by Molly is very user-friendly. I love it. The inner pocket is just the right size, and the base is sturdy with a wide gusset. Actually, I have 2 more at home. My mother-in-law didn't say a word. She clearly wasn't amused, but she probably didn't want to be disliked by the upscale family she had targeted. It really helped that she was unusually quiet. After that, we had a very pleasant home party. We had just moved here and didn't know much about the local area. Madison's family, having lived here longer, knew a lot about nice shops and places. They shared many useful tips with us. I have other friends who read Molly's blog too. Would you like to join us for lunch sometime? Madison extended a delightful invitation. It looked like we might have a good neighborhood relationship as friends going forward. My mother-in-law glared at me with an incredible expression and gritted her teeth. She must have been upset that her favorite celebrity friend seemed to prefer my company. Other people? If they're wealthy, I don't like them. They're greedy and vile. Those kinds are usually from bad families. She suddenly snapped, seemingly out of nowhere. It was embarrassing how she angrily spouted baseless accusations. The invitation was for me, not her, so her input was unnecessary. More importantly, it was rude to speak ill of guests I had happily invited. I suspect she was upset about being overshadowed, but it was largely her own fault. The reason she didn't know my circumstances is due to her own usual behavior. Telling her anything in advance just results in her sulking. And her ignorance about the internet stems from her stubborn refusal to learn despite repeated invitations from her husband and grandchildren. Furthermore, she's not really part of any elite circle, so she should give up on such pretenses. I'm sorry, please don't take it the wrong way. The contrast between my and my mother-in-law's behavior only highlighted her oddness more. Then my husband chimed in, speaking in his usual relaxed tone. I've never cared about family background, though. Oh, but you know Molly's family. Her ancestor was just in that big historical drama series on TV. That's right. Those times often feature in dramas. My mother-in-law froze, and Madison's family started buzzing. This was something I had only discussed with my husband and close friends, but my ancestor was well known enough to be recognized by anyone familiar with history. However, my family has become normal, and now we're just ordinary civilians. When my husband mentioned my ancestor's name, Madison's family all nodded as if they recognized it. My mother-in-law, who had never seriously studied history, did not catch the reference. She turned bright red and trembled. Not from embarrassment this time, but from apparent anger. About an hour later, Madison's family left. As they were leaving, Madison commiserated with me. It must be tough. But your husband is as kind and adorable as described in your blog, which was comforting. Please don't let your mother-in-law get you down. I simply replied, thank you, and smiled as I saw them out. As soon as the door closed, my mother-in-law's complaints exploded. I wish they wouldn't praise Molly so much. Living in a nice house is thanks to Alex's earnings. Those who earn more are indeed superior. Since she's supported, she should be humble. Alex, stop smiling and teach your rude wife some manners. Her face contorted with frustration, making her look years older. Her ranting was quite ugly. I was concerned her voice might carry beyond the door. Then my husband turned to her with an uncharacteristically serious look. I realized it was the first time she was revealing her true self in front of him. Surely, he would stand up for me now. It's not like that, Mom. We live here thanks to Molly. I told you before, didn't I? Didn't you listen? Molly pays the entire rent here. Sure, I cover the living expenses, but honestly, Molly earns quite a bit more than I do these days. I write a column for a magazine in addition to my blog and, fortunately, have a decent income. My collaborations and streams are also doing well. Though freelance work is unstable, lately I've been earning a bit more than my husband, which is true. The way he spoke and his expression were colder than usual. Internally, I cheered for my husband standing firmly by my side, and I added my own words. I'm sorry for not discussing this earlier. It's embarrassing for me to be earning like this. More importantly, I find it shameful to behave like that in front of the guests we invited. It's disappointing. There seems no need to force a smile anymore. My mother-in-law, in her agitation, looked around frantically. She looked up, then down, at me, and finally, glaring at my husband, she raised her voice. Are you saying you're being outdone by such a woman? How much do you even earn? What about your father's inheritance? If you include that, surely you would be. My husband interrupted her mid-sentence, revealing a fact I was unaware of, which startled me a bit. Dad's inheritance? What are you talking about? Mom received half of that, and there's hardly anything left of it. Maybe about $20? My husband chuckled, but my mother-in-law and I were agape. I didn't know the exact amount of my father-in-law's inheritance. I knew he had received it, but since it was his asset, I thought it wasn't my place to comment. So, even when I heard it was all spent, I didn't know how much it had been. I glanced at my mother-in-law's face in surprise, and it was shockingly pale. She must have thought it was a considerable amount. Remember when you came asking for help because you couldn't pay your bill? I paid it several times, right? It all went there. That was the money inherited from Dad. Because we can't use our crucial savings for such things. I exclaimed in shock, unable to articulate my astonishment. I couldn't imagine my mother-in-law spending so much on such frivolities. Unaware or not of my distress, my husband continued nonchalantly. Yeah, the inheritance is gone, so I can't pay next time. You'll have to manage on your own. At Alex's words, my mother-in-law gasped. Just from that, I could tell she was still involved in the same activities. My mother-in-law is in her late 60s, but saying, "You still look so young," might be too sarcastic. What should I do then? I have nothing left either. Molly, you have to say something. I silently shook my head. Disappointed, my mother-in-law left our house. After she left, I grabbed my husband and pleaded to keep her away for a while. I thought he might resist since she is his mother, but he understood immediately and called her. Mom, your behavior this time, calling Molly a maid and all, was too much. So, the main thing is, you're banned from our house. Did you see how the neighbors looked? Don't embarrass us to the level that we can't live in our new home. I stopped short of saying she should be completely banned, but thinking that she really wouldn't come anymore. I kept quiet, relieved that I wouldn't have to endure such hardship again. I was genuinely pleased that my husband had spoken up so clearly. Encouraged by him, I then called the most reliable ally I could think of. It was my sister-in-law Michelle, Alex's real sister. Michelle and I are great friends. When I heard that my mother-in-law was coming, I had immediately informed her. Michelle and her husband are currently living with my mother-in-law. After my father-in-law passed away, my mother-in-law, left alone, somewhat forced her way into living with them. Michelle's couple lives in a house with spare rooms since their children are independent. Thus, they had allowed my mother-in-law to stay with them. Michelle had told me, if Mom does something, let me know right away. Apparently, my mother-in-law had caused trouble at Michelle's place before too. She went around boasting as if the house she was living in, actually owned by her daughter and son-in-law, was hers, which infuriated Michelle. Could you not brag about our house as if it's yours? The neighbors said, nice to have parents build you a house. We're still paying the mortgage, think about us. She had shouted at her. Michelle doesn't really like her own mother because, from a young age, to boast about her parenting. She fabricated demanding stories about her daughter and son that never happened. These caused unnecessary embarrassment not just once or twice but over many years, fostering long-standing irritation. By the way, the house Michelle and her husband live in is under a 20-year mortgage plan, and they are still paying it off together. It's understandable to be upset if someone falsely claims your hard-earned achievements as their own. If you mess up again, I'll end our cohabitation. I've told you to live on your pension alone. Thank you for letting me know. If you come back today, I won't be able to sleep tonight. I'll make sure everything is packed. True to her word, my mother-in-law, who was kicked out, came crying back the next day. She was still pulling the suitcase she had taken with her, and was wearing the same clothes as when she left. Right after she returned home, Michelle and her family must have scolded her, and she had come back as she was. The image of my mother-in-law on the intercom screen looked so exhausted that I thought maybe we should let her stay for a day. I turned to my husband as if to say, should we let her in? But my dear naive husband just smiled and responded. No way, Mom, didn't I say you're banned? Kicked out by your sister? Oh come on, you're just saying that to get in, aren't you? Nope, you need to leave. Without listening to anything else my mother-in-law had to say, my husband abruptly ended the intercom call. I was stunned. This time I was grateful for his approach, but I couldn't help thinking how he had managed to live for 45 years being so oblivious to situations. I had been so busy raising children that I hadn't realized just how naive my husband was. Or perhaps, he had to be oblivious to survive in such a family environment. It's disappointing that he hadn't changed during the years we spent together, but now that our children have moved out, it's just the two of us again after 19 years. I'm determined to retrain my husband this time. 6 months since that incident, I am living happily every day. It seems Madison has spread the word and I am getting more greetings from neighbors. Some have seen my blog and broadcasts, which is a bit embarrassing, but it's nice to have more friends. The house has finally settled down. If I think of him as a big son, my charming husband is like a comfort zone. There are still times when I feel lonely without our children, but the time as a couple isn't bad. Later, my mother-in-law started living alone in a small house. If it weren't for her constant issues, she could have had a retirement surrounded by children and grandchildren, but now she leads a lonely life. With a modest living, she can no longer visit the nightclubs she loved. It seems unlikely that she will receive much help from Michelle this time, so the clubs probably won't entertain her anymore. Having plenty of time for hobbies and work is also a blessing. I had declined previous offers due to lack of time, but now a publisher has approached me about possibly writing a book. Being able to embark on new challenges is possible now that all the troublesome matters are settled. However, I recently had a suspicion. Perhaps my husband isn't naive, but a schemer pretending to be naive. When I asked Michelle about where my mother-in-law had gone, I learned about this. My husband had arranged her living situation. He doesn't provide financial help but does assist in finding her a place. Moreover, the condition was no contact except for hospitalization or family funerals. I was stunned to learn he had done all this behind the scenes. Michelle continued. You know, Alex is actually quite cunning. He may look innocent and clueless, but inside is different. Her analogy was so unique I almost missed it, but it sounded quite ominous. Apparently, when my mother-in-law incurred debts at a nightclub, my husband was furious and immediately consulted lawyers and the police. While he claimed it was to prevent debt collectors from harassing the family, his true intention seemed different. He actually wanted to shut down the nightclubs. He reported them for serving alcohol to minors among other things. He thought if it became well known that they had troublesome relatives, it would prevent my mother from running up tabs there. I had never seen or heard of my husband being so resolute. Could it be that he wasn't naive, but pretending all along for 19 years? The thought that he might have been acting all this time was frightening. I don't think it's just an act. He said he likes how you take charge like a big sister. Maybe he's just being pampered? Unexpectedly, I was showered with information about my husband's affection. It's like dealing with a sleepy bear. It's not just for pampering, I realized. Well, if he does all this unconsciously, it must be love rather than mere acting. Whatever the case, from now on, we will live together without any worries. I'm looking forward to a future where I can live as myself. Mom and my sister are living with us too. If you don't like it, sleep in the yard. Mike, with a sly and hideous grin, seemed to say, you can't really do that, can you? For Mike, I'm just a convenient wife, and it's an everyday occurrence for him to throw such demeaning words at me. But I can't take it anymore. Then I'll start sleeping outside from today. Don't complain about who I sleep with. At my words, Mike scoffed. However, the next morning, Mike, seeing the yard, went into a half-crazed state and regretted what he had said. My name is Sarah, a 42-year-old freelance illustrator. At this age, I've built a career and can make a decent living working from home. I lived in the city with my husband, Mike. We didn't have kids and enjoyed our carefree life as a couple. I really wanted children, but Mike hated kids and insisted on not having any. However, Tina, my mother-in-law, wouldn't try to understand our situation. A wife who can't bear children is useless. A generation ago, you would have been divorced without complaint. She would say with a sly grin every time we visited her house. Holly, my sister-in-law, was just as sarcastic as her mother. Freelance illustrator? That's just an extension of child's play, right? Getting paid for doodling. I'm jealous. But you're not really earning much, just leeching off my brother. After all, you're just a high school grad. There's a big difference between you and me, a college grad. She said this without knowing how much I earn. For the record, I make about as much as Mike, who works full-time. During busy periods, I even earn more than him. Holly, looking down on me for my education level, tries to take an educational high ground, but she herself is not currently in a stable job. She claims she could land a full-time job anytime she really tries, but at 35, it's about time she got serious, I think. The only decent one is my father-in-law, who would immediately defend me whenever I was ridiculed by the two. Sarah is a precious person to us. Don't say such disrespectful things to someone who has come to our family. Thanks to him, the two would quiet down for a while. But, disliking that my father-in-law was on my side, they would later secretly make life difficult for me. It's a vicious cycle, but I'm saved by my father-in-law's presence. If there's one good thing, it's that my in-laws' house is miles away, so we don't meet often. Normally, it's harmless, so I brush off their sarcastic comments. One day, while I was working at home as usual. What? Your father passed away? Mike suddenly called during work with this shocking news. Apparently, his illness had progressed without us knowing. With funeral preparations and other duties, I had no time to grieve in the rush of those days. I couldn't return home for a while because my mother-in-law and Holly left all the troublesome matters to me. I was exhausted in just a few days, overwhelmed by all the paperwork when someone passes away. Somehow, after managing to see my father-in-law off, I returned home and thought I could finally take time to grieve. But now, only Mom and my sister are left at home. I'm worried about the two, so we're moving to my hometown. What? You can't just spring that on me. What about work? Then, Mike, looking smug, made an outrageous statement. Don't worry, my friend runs a company back home and he's agreed to hire me. I've already settled everything. You work from home, so it shouldn't matter where you live, right? There's no problem, so relax. Mike had arranged everything without my knowledge. Afterward, ignoring my reluctance, Mike proceeded with the moving preparations. I reluctantly started preparing to move as well. Initially, Mike insisted on living with his parents, but I firmly refused and decided to stay in this house. Eventually, we contracted a condo a bit away from his parents' home and started a new life there. But after moving, my mother-in-law and Holly, having nothing better to do, would come to our house and interfere with my work. Neither of them works, so they seem to have time to spare. I've hinted several times that it's troublesome if they come too often, but I've been too indirect, and it seems they haven't gotten the message. Nearly every day, those two come to my house and do as they please. But that's not the only stress. When the neighbors see me, they whisper among themselves. People from the city stand out, don't they? Sarah, you stick out. You need to make an effort to blend in a bit. When I discussed this with Mike, the two of them happened to be there and made a snide remark. Do I really stick out? It's stressful enough dealing with Tina and Holly, but it seems like I have no allies around here. I sighed deeply, regretting moving to such a place. That day, Holly and Tina came to the condo for no reason. Don't you have any snacks in this house? Such an inconsiderate daughter-in-law. We are guests, you know? It's normal to have something prepared. Tina rummaged through the cabinets, complaining non-stop. How can I stand such selfish guests? I sighed inwardly. Holly sat down in a chair with poor manners and said to me, Hey Sarah, give me some money. What? I'm going to hang out with a friend and we're going to a theme park. So, I need you to give me money for the trip. Unabashedly begging for money, I was so appalled that I retorted. Why don't you start working seriously and earn your own money? Then you'd have more to spend freely. Holly exploded at my words. She stood up from the chair, banging the table as she yelled at me. Are you preaching to me? A low-life high school grad like you lecturing me, a college grad, is a million years too early. Know your place. Then Tina, who was listening, let out a deliberately loud sigh. That's right, Holly's right. Really, a daughter-in-law acting so high and mighty. After all, the money you're so reluctant to share is earned by our son, right? It's not your money to be so proud about. Tina puffed her chest out as if she had made a valid point. It seems they know nothing. Mike has just switched jobs to a company run by a schoolmate back in his hometown, and his salary has decreased. Thus, the allowance Holly is demanding would have to come from my wallet. But explaining this to them would surely be in vain. I'm sorry, but I'm busy, so please go back home now. Despite their continued grumbling, I somehow managed to send them away. As they left with loud footsteps, I sighed deeply, and then the neighbor emerged from the next room with an annoyed expression. Could you please keep it down a bit? Oh. Sorry. It wasn't me who was being loud, but I had inconvenienced the neighbor because of them. I had been trying to live quietly without causing any trouble. I sighed deeply once again. A few hours later, I reported today's events to Mike when he returned home. There are always neighbor issues with the condo, right? No, that's not the issue. I was about to ask him to talk to the two, but Mike interrupted me with a big smile and said something unbelievable. I've been thinking this house is too small, haven't you? Well. So, I went ahead and bought a house with a yard. Mike said it so casually, as if he had just picked up some sweets on the way home. I was so taken aback that I couldn't comprehend his words for a moment. You bought a house? Wait, what do you mean? It was a second-hand house, selling cheap. I managed to buy it with my savings. After that, I bombarded Mike with questions about when he had made such a big purchase and why he hadn't consulted me first. But it seemed to have no effect on him. He was too excited about owning our home and casually brushed off my lecturing. I was so frustrated I nearly grabbed my head, but what's done is done. And, as Mike said, we were feeling cramped in this condo, so living in a house might be better, I convinced myself. A few days later, we moved from the condo to the newly purchased house. However, we were greeted by Tina and Holly, who were also there moving in. What's going on? When I confronted Mike with a trembling voice, he responded nonchalantly. Oh, didn't I mention? Both Mom and my sister will live here too. The old house was getting too run down, so we're demolishing it and just selling the land. The construction contract is already in place, and the land sale is underway. Wait, why didn't you tell me? Dizzy from the unbelievable reality in front of me, I held my head as Mike casually opened his mouth. Well then, I'll say it now. Mom and my sister are moving in too. If you don't like it, sleep in the yard. Mike grinned maliciously, as if saying, you can't really do that, can you? At that moment, seeing his vile smile, something inside me snapped. Then I'll start sleeping outside from today. Don't complain about who I sleep with, okay? Like I would complain. Do as you please. Watching our argument, the two onlookers laughed and chimed in. Great. Now the nuisance is gone. We'll have more room in the house. Why don't you just go back to your parents' house? Ignoring the two laughing mockingly, I moved my belongings to the yard. Then, to prepare for sleeping outdoors, I made a call to someone. The next day. Oh, I slept well. I stretched mightily in the yard of the house Mike had bought. It felt like I had slept well for the first time in a long time. After I moved my belongings out to the yard, Mike spitefully closed all the curtains in the house. So it seems he didn't know I was in the yard. However, he can't keep the curtains closed forever. As morning arrived, Mike opened the house curtains. And upon seeing the yard, his face was a picture of shock. What is that? Well, you said I shouldn't complain about who I sleep with, right? Mike, trembling, pointed next to me and exclaimed, Who brings such a huge dog into our yard? My pet dog, referred to as the huge dog, wagged its tail in response. This dog is a Rottweiler, a breed classified as a giant dog. And I had set up a giant tent in the yard, brought from my parents' home, and spent the night there with my dog. The person I had called was my mother. I explained the situation to her and borrowed the tent and my pet from my parents' home to spend the night here. It would have been enough to just borrow the tent, but since I had the opportunity to camp out in the spacious yard, and it was a perfect chance for my large-bodied pet to have a great time, I took it. My dog loves spending time outdoors, and as I expected, was in high spirits all of yesterday. I too had a fun night and was in a good mood from the morning. However, Mike was pale and clearly not in a good mood.
That's your parents' dog, right? Take it back to their house now.
Yes, Mike has a significant fear of large dogs. Bringing my pet was partly to get back at Mike. Mike had been chased by a large dog when he was young, and ever since, he has been scared at the mere sight of them. Because of this, my brother had to take the dog out whenever my parents greeted Mike, but let's set that story aside. And as Mike yelled, Tina and Holly, rubbing their sleepy eyes, came out to the yard.
What's going on, Mike, yelling so early in the morning? Why is there a dog in our house?
The two let out pitiful cries. Both of them disliked dogs, and had made faces just at the mention that my parents' house had a large dog. Now that the dog had suddenly appeared in front of them, they seemed quite flustered. Together with Mike, they became nearly hysterical, shouting for the dog to get out of the house.
What are you thinking? This is why I can't believe how awful low-educated high school grads are. I never thought I had such a crazy daughter-in-law. Who does something like this? You're right. What are you thinking? Have you gone mad?
As I stayed silent, the three of them continued to berate me.
It's noisy this early in the morning, don't you think?
I asked while petting my dog, who wagged its tail vigorously. This dog, although large, has a calm demeanor, is very intelligent and kind. However, it shows no mercy to anyone who threatens its family.
Can't you hear us telling you to get out?
As Mike hurled these thorny words, my dog growled next to me. When Mike heard the sound, he let out a pathetic scream, and then there was a noise coming from the large tent where I had been sleeping.
It's lively this morning, isn't it?
Dad, good morning.
What?
The person who emerged from the tent was my father. Mike, not expecting my father to be there, exclaimed in astonishment. Hey, Mike.
Good morning.
My father said with a smile, greeting him in the morning, but Mike just stood there with his mouth agape. I'm hungry.
Bro, you ate a ton yesterday.
Then my brother came out of the tent. He's married and usually lives elsewhere, but after hearing my story yesterday.
Then, let's take this chance to camp out in the yard as a family. If anything happens, we're all here, so you'll be safe, right?
That's why we decided to camp as a family. Good morning.
It seems my daughter has been quite the trouble for you.
The last to come out was my mother. While she had a fresh smile appropriate for the morning, her eyes were not smiling. When I told her the situation yesterday, she was the angriest. While she doesn't make a big fuss like Mike's folks, my mother harbors her anger deep within. As evidence, her gaze towards my in-laws was ice cold.
Oh, long time no see.
The vigor Mike had earlier was gone, and he twitched the corners of his mouth, trying to force a smile. Mike is bold towards me but can't stand up to my father and brother. The reason is both are quite muscular, and Mike is intimidated by them. My father is a muscular former police officer who still works out daily even after retiring. Last year, he even won a triathlon competition, so he's confident in his physical strength. And my brother is a police officer, who normally ensures the safety of the town. Influenced heavily by our father, he also works out whenever he gets a chance. His wife and daughter are amazed at how much he exercises, but to me, he's a dependable brother. The family dog that my father and brother take for walks is also incredibly muscular. Having kept up with their intense exercise regimen since he was a puppy, it's a natural result.
Well, although I have a lot to say, first, thank you for lending us your yard. Thanks to that, we had a great time as a family without any need for water.
My mother said politely. Surrounded by muscular men, my mother actually holds the highest position in our family hierarchy. The dog is most attached to her and recognizes her as the leader of the pack. Even now, he sat obediently by her side. Both my brother and father always say they can't beat my mother, no matter how much they exercise. While my mother doesn't have physical strength, she shows her strength when it really matters. Once, when I was bullied by a classmate in elementary school, my mother immediately confronted the teacher and dragged the bully's parents to the school.
Enough with the excuses. I'm asking for a reason why you did such things to my daughter. Now, please don't hesitate to explain.
My mother maintained a smile throughout, but her presence was formidable, and eventually, the bully's parents and the child themselves started crying. That was when I vowed never to anger my mother. If I had consulted my family before things got to this point, my parents and brother would have supported me. But I didn't want to worry my family. I wanted to reassure everyone that I was happily married. So even when I was harassed by my mother-in-law and Holly, Mike decided to move without consulting me. When I called my mother yesterday, she was both angry and worried over the phone.
You've always been patient, but I can't bear to see you suffer like this. After all, you are my precious daughter.
I'm a fully grown adult, not a child who needs to be coddled by her mother. But hearing those words, I nearly cried and deeply regretted not consulting her sooner. And now, my mother confronted my in-laws with the same smile she had when facing that bully's parents. My mother and in-laws had only really spoken during our first meeting and at the wedding. Since then, they hadn't met much, so they probably never thought she could be so intimidating.
I've heard everything you said about my daughter from inside the tent. Calling her an uneducated high school grad, saying she's crazy. Now, what was your intention with those harsh words?
Please, enlighten us. Her tone was polite but carried an undeniable pressure that allowed no rebuttal. Her eyes never smiled, and each time my mother spoke, it felt as if the temperature in the room dropped. Glancing at my father and brother, I noticed their complexions paled even though they weren't the ones being scolded. Even the family dog, peering up at my mother, seemed frightened, shrinking away. The in-laws, facing my mother's direct anger, all turned deathly pale.
It's just a little misunderstanding. Sarah and I just had a small argument.
Really? Just a small argument, huh? As Mike hurriedly made excuses, my mother's icy tone and look made him pale even more. Then, Mike turned his attack towards me.
It's underhanded for you to bring your own family here.
However, I was unfazed by Mike's attack.
Well, you are with your family too, aren't you? It's not underhanded at all, is it?
I immediately retorted, and Mike was at a loss for words. He seemed desperate to outtalk me, but he was clearly at a disadvantage. After a moment of thought, Mike's expression suddenly brightened, as if he had a brilliant idea.
Fine, I want a divorce. Doing whatever you want in my house.
It seemed like Mike thought he had one. Could that really be his trump card? Did he think that by mentioning divorce, I would be shocked and apologize? I felt nothing about being divorced by Mike at this point. My affection for Mike had been exhausted long ago. With a sigh, I opened my mouth and dropped a bombshell.
I'm fine with the divorce, but don't forget to pay for your affair.
What?
You thought I didn't notice? Having an affair with a coworker in this small town. It was bound to come out.
Yes, Mike had been having an affair with a woman in her 30s at the company run by his classmate. The woman was also married, so this revelation was bound to cause a scandal. I had been suspicious because Mike had been coming home late. I found a woman's handkerchief in his pocket and a hotel receipt, which confirmed the affair. There's no detective agency in this rural area, so I had to investigate myself, and I found evidence of the affair one after another. Aren't you even trying to hide it? I wondered as more and more evidence piled up.
I can definitely request divorce if I submit this to a lawyer. Then let me introduce you to a lawyer I know.
Really? That would be helpful, Dad. Mike was obviously shocked that his affair had been discovered, his face as white as paper. Yet, he hadn't given up and retorted with a trembling voice.
It's your fault. You're always busy with work and don't pay attention to me.
My brother immediately responded.
My wife works full-time too, but being neglected isn't a reason to have an affair. That's a rather selfish excuse.
My brother looked at Mike with disdain. Even though they were both married men, it was clear that my brother could not comprehend Mike's reasoning.
That's right. You're unreliable, and that's why our daughter has to work so hard. If you were a dependable husband, none of this would have happened.
My father chimed in with support, attacking Mike. Faced with their reasonable arguments, Mike could only mutter. My mother-in-law and Holly tried to defend him.
It's obviously your daughter's fault. Yes. And to think she claims to work so hard, her job isn't even that significant.
My mother responded instantly to their words.
Feel free to say whatever you want. I feel sorry for any lawyer who takes such a case. Do you not understand common sense?
My mother's sharp words made my mother-in-law step back involuntarily.
And Holly, do you even know how much my daughter earns? If you search her name, you'll see she works with well-known companies. And you talk so high and mighty, but aren't you unemployed at your age, living off your brother and his wife? Aren't you ashamed?
At that moment, Holly's face turned red.
How dare you say such things to my family?
Mike looked at the two being scolded by my mother, his face filled with restrained anger. My mother was only stating the truth, but it seemed Mike didn't like hearing it. Facing Mike, I sighed heavily and spoke.
I really wonder why I married someone like you. I'm astonished at my own lack of judgment. What did you say? You forgot what you did to me? Convenient memory you have, huh? And those two threw worse insults at me than my own family ever did. Called me the bottom of the barrel because I didn't finish college, a useless wife because I can't have kids.
Since we moved here, you've treated me like a convenient servant, haven't you? Compared to that, don't you think my family is quite reasonable? I unloaded all my accumulated grievances on them. Until now, I had been enduring it all, not wanting to worry my real family. But from now on, there's no need to endure.
Let's get a divorce. I'm sick of being exploited by you all. Wait, Sarah, calm down, let's talk this through. There's no need to talk anymore. I want to sever ties with you as soon as possible. And no matter how much we discuss, I will never forgive what you've done to me. You better brace yourselves for the consequences.
My words were the final blow, and Mike collapsed on the spot. My mother-in-law and Holly also slumped their shoulders in defeat. After that, we quickly began to pack and return to my parents' home.
Well, I'll be heading back to my parents' house now. I'll handle the divorce proceedings later.
I called out to Mike and his family, but there was no response. I let out a small sigh, packed up the tent and my belongings into the car, and left the in-laws' house. Afterward, I successfully divorced Mike. Getting a lawyer introduced by my father early on proved effective. The in-laws could be bold against me, but were utterly weak against an authoritative third party. The division of property demand was accepted just as I wished. However, Mike had no savings left after buying a house. He tried to borrow money from the classmate who had employed him but got caught having an affair with a colleague, which enraged his classmate. As a penalty for disrupting workplace discipline, both Mike and his affair partner were fired. Reluctantly, Mike borrowed money from a predatory lender to survive. Apparently, just paying the interest was a struggle for him. The affair partner was also divorced by her husband. Mike eventually had to sell the house he had just bought to cover living costs. After selling the house, Mike moved with his mother and Holly to a cheap, run-down place and barely managed to find a part-time job, leading a life of extreme financial distress. Holly finally decided to start working, but having no substantial work history, she couldn't even land a part-time job. His mother registered with a senior job placement service, but there being few jobs in the countryside, in the end, Mike had to support all three of them with his part-time earnings. Barely making ends meet on his own, the future holds nothing but bleak prospects for the three of them. While handling the divorce proceedings, I spent several days moving things out of the in-laws' house. During that time, a neighbor suddenly approached me.
You're the new lady who moved in here recently, right?
Yes, that's right. The neighbor looked concerned and said,
That family is quite infamous around here for being haughty and nasty to everyone. We were all worried about you. Are you okay? If you ever need to talk, I'm here for you.
When I moved here, I was whispered about by the locals and thought I was being ostracized as an outsider. But perhaps they were just worried about me. Realizing this, I relaxed and smiled. I'm fine, thank you. Telling the neighbor about my divorce, she genuinely seemed relieved and said it was good news. I regretted thinking I shouldn't have moved to this place and silently apologized in my heart. Then left the in-laws' house with my belongings. If it weren't for Mike and his family, this place would have been a nice place to live. After moving out and completing the divorce proceedings, I finally settled down. However, one day, Mike sent me this message.
Now it's all settled, right? Let's start over.
I had left Mike's contact unblocked. But receiving such a creepy message made me deeply regret not blocking him sooner.
Start over with you? What kind of punishment game is that? No amount of money would make me reconsider. Don't ever contact me again. If you try to reach out to me again, I'll consult my lawyer.
After sending that message, I immediately blocked Mike's contact. From then on, Mike no longer had any involvement in my life. After our divorce, I moved back to the city and started living a carefree and comfortable life. I treated my family who supported me to a nice resort trip. It was a delightful time, making memories with my parents and my brother's family that will last a lifetime. With the divorce from Mike and no longer needing to care for his family, I now have more freedom, both emotionally and time-wise. I could dive back into work, but I don't need to push myself too hard financially anymore. There's no longer a need to support Mike's family, so my finances are more relaxed. Having learned from my failed marriage with Mike, I'm open to finding a new relationship. Being single at my age is not unusual in the city, and there seem to be plenty of opportunities for dating events targeted at people in their 40s. It will take some courage, but I'm planning to attend one of these parties soon. I've vowed never to neglect myself again. Remembering that I am the one who can truly value myself, I am looking forward to living a joyful life from here on out.
Debbie, I've got just 2 things to tell you. I sold the house for $1 million and bought a new place. Also, I've filed the divorce papers, so this is it for us. After 3 months in the hospital, I returned home to find strangers living in my house. I immediately called my husband, Terry, who laughed while giving me this ridiculous news. It was a mess and should have been shocking, but I calmly responded. "Can you even move? You're about to be arrested." Terry's laughter abruptly stopped but resumed after a few seconds. "What are you talking about? Why would I be arrested? I heard about your accident and that you were hospitalized. Did you hit your head too hard? Go back and get your brain checked out." He's the one who needs a mental checkup. I know everything about how reckless he's been. It's not a bluff, Terry's arrest is a certainty. Disappointed by how clueless he was, I began planning my next move. A few days later, I called Terry to discuss matters. I parked my car a little away from the meeting spot, took a deep breath, and started talking. "Terry, you can't just sell the house on your own. You never even consulted me, right? It's in my name, so what's the problem? It's my house, I don't need your permission." "Yeah, it's in your name, but it's in mine too, right? It's joint ownership, so you can't sell it without my consent." "Yeah, it's also in your name. But I don't need your consent to sell it. I've already sold it and got $1 million. He leaned back triumphantly, his smile brimming with confidence. His face practically screamed, "Ask me how I did it," so I had no choice but to ask. "Go ahead and explain, then. How did you sell the house? I'll only say this once, so listen up. I sold it personally, just like that. You're right, it's a hassle with all the paperwork if you go through a realtor. But when you do it privately, no problem. Bet you didn't know that, huh?" He pointed at me, asserting his dominance. Terry had been looking down on me for about a year, so it was nothing new. With his obnoxious, nerve-grating laughter, my husband continued talking. "I work for my dad's company and I'm considered an elite salesperson. For me, selling a house or two is a piece of cake. I even sold it for double the price you would get through a realtor. Life is easy, huh? Interesting. But are you sure? Private sales are legally invalid, so the whole deal is void." "What? No way. The buyer agreed to it. I didn't agree as a co-owner, so it's not valid. Plus, you sold it for double the price without an appraisal. You've committed a pretty serious offense. The contract is void, so you'll have to return the full amount. They might even sue you for damages.
Immediately, his obnoxious laughter died down. His face paled and his hands trembled slightly. From this reaction, it was clear he knew nothing. If he did, he wouldn't have tried to handle the sale privately.
How do you know so much? You're not lying, are you?
What would be the point of lying now?
Fair enough, then just agree to this, Debbie. If you agree to the sale, it'll solve everything. We're still a married couple, right? We should help each other out. We're divorced, remember? You filed those papers without asking me. Oh, right.
So much for being an elite salesperson. This mess happened because he only thought about himself. Having already bought a new place, Terry is now stuck. If he has to repay the full amount and gets sued for damages, he'll be in deep debt. Realizing this, his face turned pale, and he started fidgeting nervously. But then, he seemed to come up with a new plan and said,
"Well, we just need to not get caught, right? The buyer was some old guy in his 60s, so he probably hasn't realized it yet. If we can get away, we'll be fine. I've still got some money left, we could fly abroad or something."
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
You could possibly get away with it if you're not caught. If you're not caught, that is.
Right then, a man appeared behind me. Terry was so shocked he could barely speak when he saw the man. His reaction was so over the top that I couldn't help but laugh.
What's with that look?
Don't be rude to our guests.
Allow me to introduce Kenneth Gordon. You don't need to introduce him. This is the old guy I sold the house to. How the hell do you know this guy, Debbie?
I'll only say this once, so listen up.
He visited me in the hospital almost every day while I was there. We talked a lot, and he told me all about you. He came to see you in the hospital? Why would this old man visit you unless you're having an affair with him, aren't you?
At that moment, Kenneth and I glanced at each other and burst out laughing. Terry's assumption was so absurd we couldn't hold back. Since I couldn't stop laughing, Kenneth turned to him and explained everything that had happened.
Debbie saved my life. She ended up in the hospital because she tried to help me. That's why I visited her. I must say, I was shocked to find out you're her husband. I thought she was single because you never visited her.
Not once. Although Kenneth spoke calmly, his words carried clear anger. He was right. Terry never visited me while I was in the hospital. Before the accident, Terry was already cold toward me, barely paying attention when I spoke. He must have already decided to abandon me.
Kenneth! No need to be mad. I was too busy with work to visit, that's all. And it was just a fracture. It's not about the severity. I just can't believe you'd leave your wife alone in the hospital. It's obvious from your behavior that you neglected Debbie. Being fooled by someone like you is humiliating. That house isn't worth $1 million, it's only worth half that. I will sue you for full repayment.
Kenneth's words and gaze grew sharper, leaving Terry flustered and tongue-tied. He was steadily running out of options, but my husband was still struggling, desperately thinking through every possible way out. With that in mind, I decided to make my next move.
So, Terry, tell me about the divorce papers. How did you submit them? Well, I signed on behalf of you, and submitted them.
Why?
I knew it. So, you forged my signature without permission, huh? That's falsifying private documents and using forged documents, which are clear crimes. I've already filed a complaint. What? What did you say? Don't tell me, when you said I'd be arrested by the police.
The day I got back from the hospital and Terry told me he'd submitted the divorce papers, I immediately had doubts. Our relationship had grown cold, but neither of us had ever mentioned divorce. I had no memory of signing those papers, so the only conclusion was that he forged my signature.
And as for the house sale, I could also file a fraud complaint. The police here are thorough, so they should be arresting you soon.
Looks like you've really done it this time, Terry.
Hey, Debbie, let's call off the divorce. I'll go to the lawyer's office right now and cancel it. You don't really want a divorce, right? Let's just put this behind us.
I was beyond dismayed at his ridiculous proposal. There's no way to pretend this never happened. Terry was planning to dump me anyway, and there was no way we could stay married after all this. Besides, he's still hiding something important. So I decided to dig deeper. There's no need to cancel, Terry. I've got divorce papers ready. Even if you hadn't filed them, I would've. Could you sign them now?
What? Why do you have divorce papers ready? No way!
Oh, you thought I wouldn't find out? Her name is Jessica, right? Your mistress. She's gorgeous, I'll give you that. Quite the move, Terry. At the mention of the specific name, he froze as if time had stopped. Yes, Terry had a mistress named Jessica. The house sale, the new home, the divorce. All of this was done for his mistress. Terry had been sneaking around with her long before my 3-month hospital stay. That's why he'd grown cold toward me. My husband had looked down on me and was so sure of himself that he assumed I hadn't caught on. I stared at him with utter contempt. He seemed taken aback for a moment but quickly fired back.
Don't accuse me without proof. I don't know anyone named Jessica. Asking divorce based on your fantasies, that's the real fraud here.
Are you sure you want to say that? You'll regret it later. Just apologize.
What is this? Are you trying to trick me?
I'm only giving you a fair warning. You're definitely cheating, and I'm about to prove it. I turned and pointed to a specific spot. In the distance was my car, parked away from the meeting point. Suddenly, the car door swung open. And a petite woman stepped out, about 4 feet 11 inches tall, with good looks. Hello, Terry. Did you forget about me? After all those passionate nights, that's a bit cruel, isn't it?
Hey, Debbie, did you bring Jessica in your car? So that's why you parked a little further away.
You didn't notice at all, did you, Terry? By the way, I had her phone on a call with mine, and she was listening through the speaker. She heard everything. When I suspected my husband's infidelity, my investigation led me to Jessica. Before confronting Terry, I reached out to her. When I revealed I was Terry's wife, she was utterly shocked. It was because he had lied to her about being single. Jessica believed she was in a serious relationship with him, but was furious when she realized she'd been deceived. She apologized to me and agreed to help teach Terry a lesson. You can't deny this now, right? Or I could provide evidence if you like. My phone is packed with memories of you, from fancy dinners to your sleeping face in bed. Terry, there's no escape. Confess your guilt and apologize to everyone. Then accept your punishment. I'm filing for divorce. Kenneth deserves a full refund of the money from the house sale. After a moment of silence, he spoke timidly.
I have a request. Could I pay in installments? I really don't have the money right now, but I'll definitely pay, I promise, please.
Desperately, he begged, looking small and panicked. Kenneth and Jessica frowned at him. They didn't know he'd bought a new house. So they assumed he still had the $1 million. Kenneth, Terry bought a new house. He also spent tons of money on high-end restaurants to impress Jessica, so he's broke. He doesn't have any means to repay you. What? Really? Then, I'll have to file a complaint. What a shame. Goodbye, Terry.
No! Please wait! I said I'd pay in installments. I'll definitely pay. I'm a salesperson. I gave you my business card when I sold you the house, right? I'm the top performer at Harris Trading. Please trust me.
Terry tried to use his status to avoid being reported. Harris Trading, his father's company, is well known as a major corporation. If my husband is recognized there, he might actually be able to pay. But I shook my head and advised Kenneth. Please don't believe him, Kenneth. He will never be able to repay. Let's go ahead and file that complaint.
Debbie, how come are you so sure? I could definitely pay it back. I've worked hard and have a proven track record.
Really? But you're gonna get fired, aren't you? You're gonna be unemployed soon, so don't say you can repay it.
What? Fired? No way. Don't assume that.
You think I decided that? You really have no idea, do you, Terry? Just wait a moment. I'll make it clear. Here, I pointed once again to my car parked a little ways away. Just like last time, the car door swung open forcefully. Then an older couple stepped out. Terry's face paled rapidly, and he began trembling. The older couple were his parents. They approached slowly, their faces like demons, while tension filled the air around us.
Dad, Mom, what are you doing here? We heard from Debbie. We were waiting in her car, listening to everything through the speaker. Terry, it sounds like you've gotten yourself into quite the mess, huh? You sold the house without even talking to Debbie, then filed for divorce on your own? And you handled the sale privately, too. What were you thinking, causing so much trouble for so many people? You've got to be kidding me. Jessica and my parents were in on this?
I'd already reported everything to my in-laws. To deliver the maximum blow to Terry, it was essential to have them here today.
I'm utterly disappointed in you. You told us everything was fine between you two, but that was a lie. You will never show up in front of us again and you're fired from the company. I'm fired? Wait, Dad. Yes, I cheated, but that has nothing to do with the company. Please reconsider. I bought the new house for you and Mom, so you'd be taken care of in your old age. I want you both to stay healthy.
Terry was trying to win over his parents. He was trying to act like a good husband by giving a false reason for the purchase, but his parents were not convinced at all. On the contrary, their anger seemed to grow, and they glared at my husband with terrifying expressions.
No matter what you say, Terry, you're fired. It's final. Take some time for self-reflection and find another job. Understood? You've got to be kidding me. Do you know how much I've contributed to the company? Even when business was tough, I was the one who helped us pull through. Now you're gonna discard me just like that? What's your problem?
Terry exploded in rage, pleading his case to his father. It's true that he had worked hard all these years. And his success at Harris Trading, a large company, was the result of his efforts. According to my in-laws, he had always been a diligent student and very bright. It was also he could work at his father's company and eventually take over the business. Naturally, his intentions were well understood by his parents. But despite understanding his dedication, his father calmly replied, "Yes, I'm grateful for all your hard work, Terry. I've been tough on you, but you never gave up. Right? Then cancel my termination. I promise to pay Kenneth back. I'll change my ways and work hard." No, that's not possible. I'll say it again, you're fired, and that's final. Accept it, Terry.
Why? I'm begging you. Debbie, did you say something to them? Is that it? Confess, you must have told them something.
Now he turned his anger toward me. He seemed to have no regard for appearances anymore. Of course, I hadn't said anything unnecessary. But Terry's father had reasons to fire him beyond this whole mess. The house sale, the new purchase, the divorce, the affair, and one more thing, Terry had committed a serious crime. Terry, why don't you confess? You stole company funds and blackmailed your coworkers.
What? Stealing company money, you mean embezzlement?
And the blackmailing of your colleagues. Is that true? Yes, it seems so. There was an internal whistleblower. One of his subordinates stood up with courage, and the truth started to come out. That's why his father couldn't reverse the termination. Terry had gone too far, and there was no way to fix it. With everything now out in the open, he had no way out. He glanced around at everyone, but I shook my head slightly. Seeing this, he realized his fate. And he collapsed to his knees in defeat. Apologize, Terry. That's the only thing you can do right now.
Then, atone for your sins and start over. No, I don't want to get arrested. Debbie, help me, we're still married, aren't we? Mom, Dad, please help me too.
Don't conveniently use the marriage card now.
As Debbie said, your only path is to apologize and make amends.
Submitting the divorce papers without telling her and then relying on your wife only when you're in trouble? Pathetic. Kenneth and Jessica looked at Terry with pity. And it's no wonder. Even at the very end, he was only thinking of himself. Seeing him completely silenced, I felt a small sense of relief. But the next moment, a strong impact struck me.
Don't get cocky with me, Debbie. Don't lecture me.
Suddenly, my husband leaped to his feet, shouting as he lunged at me. I couldn't react in time and was caught in his grip. He seized me by the collar, leaving me unable to breathe or call out. My carotid artery was squeezed tight, and I nearly passed out. But immediately afterward, Terry's body flew through the air, and I was freed. Gasping for air and coughing, I turned to see who had thrown him. It was Jessica.
Terry, I didn't know you were this rotten. A man who lays a hand on a woman is scum. I will never forgive you.
It goes without saying that everyone present was completely stunned. The petite Jessica, standing at just 4 feet 11 inches, had tossed Terry effortlessly. I later found out that Jessica was a formidable athlete who won the National Combat Sport Tournament in high school. She began combat sport because a friend of hers was being bullied by a male classmate. Since then, she's been throwing around jerks who mess with women.
That was incredible. Such a perfect throw. Debbie, are you okay?
Yes, I'm okay.
It was a shock.
Should we call the police?
This is assault, right?
Yes, he attacked a defenseless woman, so he can't complain. Let's dial 911.
Wait, please! I was wrong. I'll do anything, just don't call the police.
Oh, I'm sorry. I already dialed 911. If you have something to say, you can tell the officers.
No! What have I done? Someone help me!
Terry broke down in tears, lamenting his mistake. We all sighed deeply at the sight. And so, this chaotic day that felt both long and short finally came to an end. Terry and I officially divorced after that. He faced criminal charges from Kenneth for the fraudulent house sale and ended up with massive debts from damages. He had to give up the new house he had just bought, but even then, he was drowning in debt. Despite his ruined state, no one was willing to help him. It was only fitting, since he was entirely to blame. He'd have to live out his life in loneliness. But the story didn't end there. Terry tried to get back together with me.
Hey, Debbie, I realized something recently. I need you in my life. You're probably lonely too, right? You were a housewife for so long. It must be tough on your own. So, why don't we?
He really made me laugh. I wonder if he still hasn't learned. Those thoughts crossed my mind, but I was so exasperated I didn't even feel like saying them out loud. Sure, being alone gets lonely sometimes, but there's a 0% chance I'd get back with Terry. He clearly didn't understand me at all. So I decided to tell him about my current situation. I'm doing just fine on my own. I've gone back to work.
What? Back to work? But you're a housewife.
Before I met you, I worked at Northwest Real Estate. You know that name, right?
Northwest Real Estate? The big company? So that's why you knew so much about real estate. Wow, you were more elite than I was.
Terry went speechless on the phone before speaking again, having thought of something.
So, you must have money now, right? Please help me out. Northwest Real Estate must pay well, right? I'll do whatever you ask if you just help me.
You really don't get it. You're in this mess because you've only ever thought about yourself. If you don't change, you'll never move forward. Anyway, don't contact me again. Goodbye. Terry shouted something until the moment I hung up, but I blocked his number without hesitation. Now, I'm living on my own and loving my single life. The house Terry sold without permission was returned and then sold, splitting the proceeds in the divorce. Work is going well, and my days are fulfilling. Recently, I took up combat sport as a new challenge. Jessica is my instructor, of course. Since then, we've become close friends, almost like comrades in arms. When I heard that she taught combat sports, I decided to take the plunge and give it a try. It's useful for self-defense, and above all, it strengthens my mind. While Terry's behavior was the main issue in this whole ordeal, my weakness played a role too. I should have confronted Terry head-on when I learned about the affair. If I had acted sooner, perhaps the future could have been different. It's too late for what-ifs, but I wanted to change myself too. I glanced at my phone and saw a message from Kenneth. "You're my savior. I'm so grateful to have met you. You've helped me find peace." That's what it was about. I was deeply wounded by what happened with Terry. But Kenneth's sincere message gave me the confidence to start a new life, cherishing every encounter and living with honesty toward myself and others. These are my values now.
Julia, you can't take it anymore, right? It's been a while, huh? Hurry up, Bob. Your impatience is showing. Your wife will be late from her part-time job today, right? No need to rush, it'll be fine. It's not about my wife, it's about your attractiveness being the problem. Come on, hurry up.
As I listened to the disgusting conversation between the two, I secretly filmed the affair from the shadows of the garage. Unaware that I had left work early due to feeling unwell, my foolish husband Bob was truly clueless. Even with the affair happening right before my eyes, I remained calm. Because I had long been aware of my husband's infidelity. Slowly rising to my feet so as not to alert them, I blocked the garage entrance with a pole I had prepared in advance. I turned off the breaker and made sure the garage shutter couldn't be opened. I could have confronted them right then and there, but I knew that wouldn't be enough. So, I immediately contacted someone. "Bob, I'll make you regret deceiving me." With quiet anger in my heart, I began my revenge. About 30 minutes later, I called my husband. After 3 rings, he answered the phone as if nothing had happened. "What's up?" "I started feeling sick at work. I'm coming home now." "Huh, coming home now? That's not good." "What? What's not good?" "It's nothing, just my end. Are you sure you're okay? Don't rush back, take your time coming home." "Okay, thanks." "Oh, and I have a sudden business trip and will be away from home." "Oh, another sudden business trip? That's tough. Take care." Despite my sarcastic tone, my husband hung up without realizing. Sudden business trips have become my husband's standard excuse lately. He had been increasingly absent from home for 2 or 3 days at a time. I could have accused him of cheating, but instead, I chose to hang up without saying anything, pretending to encourage him. There was no need to hurry, my revenge was already underway. Slowly and surely, I would corner my husband. A few minutes later, as expected, my phone notified me of an incoming call, and sure enough, it was my husband. "What's wrong?" "The garage shutter won't open." My husband's panicked voice was just as expected, and I laughed inwardly as I deliberately responded leisurely. "Oh, really? That's tough. Maybe I can open it. I'll hurry back, so wait for me." Once again, by pretending to be considerate, I intended to shake him up a bit. My husband became visibly flustered. "Oh, no! Don't come back! I mean, aren't you feeling unwell? Shouldn't you go to the hospital first?" "Yeah, maybe." "Oh, but if the garage doesn't open, you can't go on your sudden business trip, right?" "Well, that's true, but your health is more important than my business trip. Definitely go to the hospital, okay? Do you have something to feel guilty about?" My sudden change in tone confused my husband. Now, it was time to deliver the first blow.
I'm actually right in front of the garage. Huh? Why? Didn't you just say you were hurrying back?
My husband needed time to escape from the garage before I returned home and let his affair partner go. So, realizing that I was right in front of him, he was at a loss for words. Ignoring this, I proceeded with my next move. I'll open the garage. Wait for me. To prove that I was in front of the garage, I rattled the shutter. With the loud noise, my husband, who had been skeptical, seemed to believe me.
Hey, are you really there? Okay, wait. I'm fine, so don't open it.
My husband, who was now at his wits' end, shouted loudly. His voice was loud enough to be heard clearly from the garage to the neighboring house. Even though I could hear it clearly, I pretended not to and continued to pressure him.
Okay. The breaker was tripped, so the shutter wouldn't open.
I'll open it now, so wait.
Wait, actually, I was in the garage laying out some documents. They're important documents I need for my business trip. If the shutter opens and the documents fly away, it'll be a problem. It's okay to open the shutter a little later. First, go to the hospital, okay?
I stifled the urge to burst out laughing at my husband's desperate lie. It's about time, isn't it? You're cheating, aren't you? I hit the nail on the head. I could hear my husband gasp on the other end of the phone. He fell silent, as if he'd been caught by the throat. The fact that he didn't reply was evidence that he acknowledged the truth of my words. After several tens of seconds of silence, my husband began to babble frantically, as if desperately trying to cover up his own lie.
There's no way! What evidence do you have to say that? Stop it!
As expected, my husband tried to play dumb. He should just admit it honestly. Trying to talk his way out of it will only make it harder, even though he'll be the one regretting it later. It seems my husband's mind is preoccupied with getting through this moment. If that's his intention, then I'll just keep pressing him.
If you're really not cheating, then there's no problem with opening the garage, right?
Perhaps overwhelmed by my intensity, my husband fell silent once again.
Not saying anything means it's okay to open it, right?
I muttered quietly and reached for the shutter. The shutter made a loud clanging noise. Upon hearing that sound, my husband became enraged.
Hey! What are you doing? Don't do anything unnecessary, I'll handle it. You should just shut up and listen to me.
The ear-piercingly loud shouting from his phone made my eardrums ache. But in exchange for that pain, my husband's true nature was revealed. Now, it's showtime.
Would it be a problem if I opened the shutter?
Immediately after, a male voice came from behind. My husband sounded puzzled upon hearing that voice over the phone.
Michael's voice? Why are you here?
That man is my husband's brother, Michael. It's no wonder my husband was surprised. Michael is supposed to be working overseas and shouldn't be in the US.
I've been trying to contact you multiple times. I even tried to let you know about my return this time, but you didn't answer the phone, did you? I was busy with work and didn't have time to check messages, and I couldn't answer the phone either.
I know my husband is lying. He consistently ignored calls and messages from Michael.
I'm going on a business trip today. Sorry, but I don't have time to talk to you. More importantly, Catherine's not feeling well. Can you take her to the hospital instead of me, right now?
My husband, who doesn't want to be caught in the act of cheating, tries his best to keep me and Michael away from this situation. I was amazed at my husband's bad attitude, so I sent him a certain video on his phone.
There's something I want you to see. I'm sending you a video, so watch it. Hey, what's this? I don't have time to watch a video right now. You should hurry up and go to the hospital too.
My husband grumbled, but when he saw the video that arrived, he was speechless.
Julia, you can't take it anymore, right? It's been a while, huh? Hurry up, Bob. Your impatience is showing. Your wife will be late from her part-time job today, right? No need to rush, it'll be fine. It's not about my wife, it's about your attractiveness being the problem. Come on, hurry up.
It was footage of the affair I had filmed from the shadows of the garage about 30 minutes ago. I felt nauseous again as I heard the disgusting conversation.
Why is this?
I know everything. I was with you two in the garage until just now, secretly filming your disgusting flirting from behind the scenes. Now, there's no escaping it anymore. My husband fell silent, seemingly resigned. Convinced of my victory, I restored the breaker and opened the shutter. Inside the garage were my husband and Julia, huddling together, trembling like frightened kittens.
What the hell are you two doing?
Michael's angry voice echoed through the garage. My husband and Julia trembled as if struck. My husband's face turned pale in an instant. Meanwhile, Julia covered her face with her hands, clearly not wanting to be seen.
Do you even realize what you're doing? You're sneaking around behind Catherine's back even though she exists.
My husband couldn't say anything under Michael's furious gaze. Cold sweat dripped from my husband's temples. For a while, everyone remained silent. As if breaking the silence, Michael let out a big sigh. Having regained his composure, Michael began to speak to my husband in a calm tone.
Catherine understands and accepts you. There's no one like her in this world. You betrayed that important person. It's something you can't undo. It's not something you can apologize for and be forgiven, but you should apologize sincerely first.
Unable to defy Michael, my husband faced down as if resigned. Next to him, Julia trembled in fear, still huddled and hiding her face. Amidst the silence, my husband finally spoke up. Catherine, I'm sorry. It was a small voice, but it was sincere. It would have been better if it ended there, but my husband continued to make excuses. It was a moment of weakness. There was no deep meaning. It was just a one-time mistake today. I was just momentarily possessed. So please forgive me, Catherine. Frantically trying to justify himself, my husband looked around nervously. Unable to contain my laughter, I burst out unintentionally.
What's so funny? I'm sincerely apologizing, and yet you're laughing like that. That's rude, isn't it?
Well, because you said it was a one-time mistake.
What's wrong with that?
It's ridiculous. Look at this. I threw a stack of photos at my husband. The two of them holding hands entering a hotel. The two of them cuddling on the street. There are also photos of the two of them in the car in the middle of it all. Even after seeing all this evidence, can you still say it was just a one-time mistake? I've said it many times, but I know everything. The reason I couldn't suppress my laughter was that my husband, who knew nothing, was still lying and trying to weasel out of it at this point. You're the worst. Betraying me and then lying without a care. Even after seeing this, can you still say it was a one-time mistake? My husband, stunned by the photos, listened to me in shock as I explained. Since about 6 months ago, right? When you suddenly started going on business trips. No matter what, you can't have business trips every week. I started to suspect cheating. Evidence kept coming out one after another. Messages exchanged on phones and computers deciding meeting places. Julia's chestnut-colored, long hair and accessories in the car. Receipts from the hotel they went to. You're so careless. The evidence was found immediately. There were mountains of disgusting messages like "I love you" and "Where should we meet next?" Just in case, I was monitoring you and even followed you.
What? You followed me?
You thought you wouldn't get caught? I've known about your affair for about a month now. But I deliberately let you go around to corner you. And then, you ended up bringing your affair into our home. To meet with your lover at our home. You're truly the worst. My husband, who had been listening to my words with a surprised expression, finally started to get angry.
You. Secretly monitoring and following me. That's despicable.
My blood boiled at my husband, who accused me while being guilty himself. I'll never forget this anger. I'll engrave it in my heart. I slammed my fist on the car hood.
What are you saying? Am I despicable? Don't be ridiculous. You're cheating behind my back.
To anyone, justice is on my side. The person who committed infidelity avoids the person who exposed it. There's no way such a thing would be accepted. But my husband's outburst continues.
Isn't it the fault of the one who gets cheated on? If you didn't have any faults, I wouldn't have turned to other women. It's your fault for not satisfying me.
Satisfied with his own logic, my husband smirked obscenely. What audacious defiance. If he had admitted his fault and sincerely apologized, maybe I would have felt like forgiving him. But I will never forgive my husband for layering mistake upon mistake. That's when I made up my mind.
What are you talking about? What you're saying is all messed up.
A loud shout echoed. The owner of the voice was Michael. Although he had calmed down once, Michael's anger reignited at my husband's nonsensical excuses. Normally gentle and never raising his voice, his intensity increased even more. Not content with just shouting, Michael approached my husband, grabbed his collar, and shook him.
It's obviously your fault. Blaming Catherine when you're the one cheating. What are you talking about? Both of you ganging up on me and criticizing me, isn't that cowardly? Do you hate me that much?
Cornered, my husband began to blame Michael as well. Although what he was saying was completely off the mark, my husband showed no signs of backing down. My husband has always harbored feelings of inferiority toward Michael, who is far superior to him. So far, the inferiority complex I've been desperately hiding has finally burst out uncontrollably.
Hey, Michael, you've always been sarcastic. You look down on me for my poor results in studying and finding a job.
My husband spits out humbly, his face contorted. It was the first time my husband showed his true feelings.
I also wanted to be born as talented as you. So, I worked hard in my studies. I finally managed to get a job at a big company, chasing after you desperately. I thought I've finally caught up. But now you've started working overseas and are doing well in your job, achieving success. I can never catch up with you.
As my husband stares at Michael, he continues. His eyes reveal a mix of inferiority and resentment.
I'm considered useless and incompetent at work. Even Catherine, who's just a part-timer, is recognized at her workplace. No matter how hard I try, no one acknowledges me. I had no place at work or at home, and it was tough. I was cornered.
My husband droops his head, shoulders slumping. While Michael remains silent, listening to my husband's words.
That's when I met Julia. My life changed after meeting her. She acknowledges me. I'm breaking up with Catherine and starting a new life with Julia.
As my husband speaks with confidence, his expression brightens up. Both Michael and I could only stare at my husband with disbelief. He's just too immature and selfish. Unaware of our exasperation, my husband turns to Julia and starts talking.
Hey, Julia, that's why you should marry me. Let's walk into a new life together.
Contrary to my husband's enthusiasm, Julia remains with a frightened expression, shaking her head desperately. Her actions clearly reject marrying my husband.
What's up, Julia? Weren't you supposed to marry me? You said you wanted to marry me, didn't you?
Caught off guard by Julia's unexpected reaction, my husband grabs her shoulders and shakes her. Julia averts her gaze from my husband and mutters softly. I can't marry.
What? Why not? Hey, Julia.
While shaking Julia, my husband tries to get the reason why she can't marry out of her. But Julia remains tight-lipped, refusing to say anything more.
Julia can't marry you.
Michael finally speaks up after keeping silent. The next words from Michael were an unbelievable truth for my husband.
Because Julia is already married to me. Huh?
My husband stares at Michael without blinking, realizing immediately that Michael isn't lying. He then shifts his gaze to Julia.
Is it true, Julia?
But Julia doesn't answer. Her silence speaks volumes, confirming Michael's words. My husband collapses to his knees, powerless. With Michael finally speaking up, My husband's face turns pale as the shocking truth sinks in.
The first time I met Julia was when I started working overseas. We dated for a while and eventually got married. Of course, I wanted to let you know. But you kept ignoring my calls, so I couldn't tell you.
The shocking revelation left Bob frozen, mouth agape, unable to fully comprehend. Michael's voice, however, remained clear, but as the conversation progressed, Bob's complexion grew increasingly pale.
After we got married, Julia suddenly disappeared. When I heard rumors that she had quietly returned home, I came back to look for her.
Since he couldn't contact my husband, Michael contacted me to inform him about his return. It was a perfect opportunity, so I confessed everything about my husband's affair to Michael. As we talked, it turned out that Julia, Michael's wife, was my husband's affair partner. Michael and I had known everything from the beginning. When we broke into the garage, Julia must have been surprised. After all, Michael, who was supposed to be overseas, suddenly appeared in front of her. I remember what happened when we entered the garage. Julia covered her face and bowed, clearly not wanting to be seen by Michael.
Hey, Julia, why did you suddenly disappear from me? Why did you have a relationship with my brother, knowing he was my brother?
Michael's voice is soft and gentle, but it's suffocating Julia little by little. His calm tone only makes the fear more palpable, sending shivers down my spine. Julia, who had been drooping her head, exhales softly and looks up. Then, as if steeling herself, she begins to speak.
Michael had been talking about his brother since you were overseas. You praised him as clumsy but hardworking.
I see, so that's why you became interested in Bob, huh?
Yeah, from the way you talked, I thought Bob must be a wonderful person with a lot of humanity. Michael, you're too perfect. It's like you're a robot. You're so capable that you're tough on people too. You can do everything, so I guess someone like me isn't needed, right?
Julia glanced at Michael to confirm. Michael looked straight at Julia without changing his expression. Unable to meet his gaze, Julia continued speaking.
I felt suffocated being with you. So I came back here and met Bob. Bob was indeed a wonderful person, just as you said. And yet, you still got involved with my brother even though you knew who he was.
Michael's tone turned cold. There was no love left for Julia, who betrayed him. Again, the garage fell into a silent stillness. Gradually, the tense atmosphere began to fill the air, but it was broken by my husband.
Julia, you lied to me, didn't you? You said you loved me. I didn't hear anything about you being married. You told me an outrageous lie.
Julia, now defiant, smiled with a twisted mouth.
But Bob didn't ask whether I was married or not, did he? Besides, we didn't make any promises of marriage.
There was no hint of remorse on Julia's face. Then, Julia uttered surprising words.
I still prefer Michael. He's too perfect, like a robot, but he's loaded with money. My affair with Bob was just that, an affair. Let's go back together, Michael.
Her tone shifted from earlier to a coquettish, ingratiating one. She looked up at Michael from below, wearing a smile that seemed to flatter him. It was a frivolous remark devoid of sincerity. For Julia, the affair with my husband was just a game. As a result, she didn't even consider betraying and hurting those around her. Both Julia and my husband are childish and selfish. I looked at Michael with exasperation. Even his face showed traces of exasperation.
Go back together? Julia, do you really think you can come back? If you're serious, you're a hopeless fool.
As he spoke, Michael took out a document from his chest pocket. He unfolded the document and thrust it in front of Julia.
It's a divorce paper. I've already signed it, so write your name too. Divorce? What do you mean by divorce? It was just one affair. Are you really going to divorce me just for that? Just one affair. Are you kidding me?
Michael brushed off Julia's clinging hand and shouted angrily. His face turned red with anger, almost like a demon.
You deceived my precious brother. There's no way I can forgive you.
In fact, both my husband and Michael had no parents. Since their parents passed away, Michael had been taking care of my husband like a parent. He couldn't forgive Julia for deceiving and hurting his beloved brother. Bob may be clumsy, but he's hardworking. I know that better than anyone, Michael had told me before. Michael always spoke proudly of my husband. When their parents were alive, they used to compare my husband to Michael. Unlike Michael, who excelled at everything, my husband, who was clumsy, was often criticized by their parents. As a child, my husband started to think that he was being criticized by his parents because of Michael. If only Michael weren't there. He started to harbor self-deprecating thoughts. Michael had always felt responsible for my husband's feelings. Julia could only bite her lower lip without saying anything. Meanwhile, my husband slowly turned to Michael and opened his mouth. "Did you really care about me that much?" On the other hand, my husband slowly turned to face Michael and spoke. "Michael, you've been thinking about me so much. I'm sorry, Michael. I was wrong. I've been resenting you. I always thought you looked down on me. I'm really sorry." My husband apologized deeply to Michael.
Bob, aren't you apologizing to the wrong person?
Reprimanded by Michael, my husband trembled as if struck by lightning. My husband's gaze met mine slowly. His eyes showed no traces of the immaturity or selfishness he had when he piled up excuses. It was a gaze of genuine remorse for his actions. It seemed that Michael's genuine feelings for my husband had changed him. My husband also apologized deeply to me. "Catherine, I'm sorry." His apology was sincere and heartfelt.
I understand. But my love for you has already faded. We can't walk through life together anymore. That's why we're getting a divorce.
I had decided this since I found out about the affair. I couldn't trust someone who had betrayed me once. I couldn't share my life with someone I couldn't trust. "Got it. I'll agree to the divorce. It's my fault for betraying." My husband nodded slowly to show his repentance. In contrast, Julia was quite the opposite. She seemed unwilling to agree to the divorce, clinging desperately to Michael despite being treated coldly.
"It's my fault. Please forgive me."
She repeated her apologies, regardless of appearances. Tears streaked down her face, mascara running, foundation peeling off, giving her a frightening appearance akin to a character from a horror movie. Despite Julia's desperate pleas, Michael's demeanor remained unchanged. He glared at Julia sharply, as if driving a stake through her with his sharp eyes.
"What you've done is unforgivable. My intention to divorce hasn't changed. If you understand, then disappear from my sight." "No. I absolutely refuse. I won't accept it."
Julia screamed as she got into the car and floored the accelerator. With a loud and ominous noise, the car began to speed off. A jarring sound echoed as the car crashed into the shutter almost immediately. When my husband and I entered the garage, the shutter had been closed again. Despite the car crashing into the shutter, Julia kept the accelerator floored. Julia, in the driver's seat, continued to mutter something absent-mindedly with a vacant look on her face.
"What the hell are you doing, Julia? Hit the brakes. Julia! Stop!"
My husband and Michael rushed to the car, desperately trying to stop Julia. But Julia, in her daze, didn't hear them. She continued to floor the accelerator. There was a horrible sound of the car colliding with the shutter.
"Catherine, we can't stop her. There's nothing we can do. If the car breaks through the shutter like this, someone might get hurt. Call the police."
Later, the police who arrived managed to stop Julia's rampage. Although the loud impact drew nearby residents, thanks to the swift response of the police, there were no injuries. I heard later that the neighbors had reported it. Today, my husband was shouting so loudly that it could be heard clearly in the neighboring house, but apparently, they had heard it and were keeping an eye on the situation. I'm really sorry for causing trouble. At the same time, I realized the importance of connections with people like this. As for Julia, she has no experience of working properly. She's crying to her parents and currently living with them. It seems she's working herself to the bone while being watched by her parents. My husband, awakened by Michael's words, says he wants to start his life over. His serious efforts now are a perfect match for the words Michael used, clumsy but hardworking.
Catherine, I'm really sorry about what happened with Bob and Julia. It's my responsibility that they turned out like this. I don't expect you to forgive me, but that's the way it is.
Michael apologized to me again. However, both Julia and my husband are adults now. They should take responsibility for what they did themselves, and Michael bears no responsibility. They should understand that if they act according to their desires, they will hurt those around them, and ultimately, it will come back to them. I still can't bring myself to forgive my husband's betrayal. But I'm glad he's admitting his actions and facing himself. Humans aren't perfect, and it's natural to make mistakes. Just facing oneself, admitting mistakes, and being able to change is also part of being human. This applies not only to my husband and Julia but also to me. Now that we're divorced, there's plenty of time. I'll also face myself and start my second life.
My wallet was in your bag. You thief!
My sister-in-law, who had been rummaging through her bag, glared at me as she shouted this. It happened during a dinner at my in-laws, celebrating the date set for my and my fiancé's wedding. At this gathering of my family and my fiancé's family, my sister-in-law, whom I find difficult, was also present. She had targeted me when she came to my parents' house for a marriage announcement greeting recently. Since then, she often invites me out to eat, saying things like, "I just don't have any change today, can you cover for me?" and "Oops, I forgot my wallet, can you lend me some money?" and she has never paid for her meals herself. Moreover, she has never returned the money I advanced for her. At first, I wanted to get along with my sister-in-law. But as my distrust grew day by day, I've been avoiding her as much as possible. However, being called a thief in front of my fiancé and relatives, I was stunned. The wallet my sister-in-law was holding was indeed hers, but I swear I did not steal it.
Please calm down.
What? Are you going to make excuses? I will definitely demand compensation for stealing my wallet, so be prepared.
My sister-in-law, too excited to let me get a word in edgewise, ranted. Seeing her like this, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Then the relatives also started laughing, and faced with this scene, my sister-in-law was dumbfounded.
Huh? What's so funny?
Her face turning red with anger, I decided to tell her the truth. It is funny. You've said quite a bit. My name is Nora, a 28-year-old office worker, and I'm about to get married to someone I've been dating for a while. The person is Tyler, a 30-year-old man who is my supervisor at work. Tyler has been looking out for me since I joined the company. He is generous and sincerely listens to his colleagues. Being a trustworthy supervisor was my first impression of him. As we interacted daily, we began to share personal life stories and gradually developed feelings for each other. Being close in age and having many common topics was also a catalyst. After a few years of workplace romance, our marriage was decided, and we planned to first announce our engagement to our parents. When we visited my parents' house first, my parents and sister warmly congratulated us. My sister, Julie, 7 years older than me, is already married and lives near our parents' house with her husband and 2 children. Due to a childhood illness, she now works from home as a translator, but she finished her work early today to meet me.
Congratulations, guys!
My sister smiled at me and Tyler. She has always adored me since we were kids. I also love my kind and clear-headed sister. On the way back home after greeting our families, Tyler said, "You have a wonderful sister," which made me very happy. "Tyler, you have a sister too, right? I'm really looking forward to meeting her." When I told him that, Tyler showed a complicated expression. "I'm glad you said that. But, honestly, my sister can be a bit selfish and vain. I'm worried she might bother you, Tyler replied, looking somewhat uncomfortable. It seems he didn't want me to meet his sister too much. As for me, since she will be my sister-in-law, I want to get along with her. However, I couldn't have imagined at that time that this sister-in-law would become a source of trouble for me. Later, when we visited Tyler's parents' house, his parents welcomed us.
Nora, it's been a while.
It's good to see you, said my mother-in-law in a leisurely tone, and my father-in-law smiled softly. Although I had only talked with Tyler's parents a few times at their house entrance, our relationship was good. However, since it was my first time inside their house, I was nervous about both the marriage announcement and meeting the sister-in-law for the first time. But it seemed that the sister-in-law was conveniently absent. Contrary to my disappointment, Tyler obviously looked relieved. Did he really not want me to meet his sister-in-law that much? While keeping the sister-in-law in the back of my mind, the conversation with the kind in-laws went very smoothly, and I soon relaxed and enjoyed our time. Our marriage delighted Tyler's parents, and was reassured by their reactions. It was when we started preparing to leave. Suddenly, the front door opened from the outside, and a woman entered saying, "I'm home." Tyler uttered a small ah upon seeing her.
Oh, Tyler.
What, you're leaving already?
I just got back, stay a little longer.
The woman who stood blocking the door seemed to be in her mid-30s, about the same age as my sister. However, she gave off a much stronger and more heavily made-up impression than my sister. I immediately realized this was Tyler's sister, Susie. According to Tyler, she is divorced with no children.
Nice to meet you, I'm Nora. I have been dating Tyler, and we are here today to announce our engagement.
When I said to my sister-in-law, the response I got was a nonchalant huh. Looking up, the sister-in-law scrutinized me and then smirked. Where did you meet Tyler?
Hey, this is the first time Nora's meeting you. Don't start with such questions.
Ignoring Tyler's admonishment, his sister bombarded me with more questions. How much do you earn? You look well off, must be nice. Do you work at the same company as Tyler?
Well,
I was at a loss for words from the barrage of questions, and Tyler stepped in to chide his sister.
Give it a rest. You're making Nora uncomfortable. We're leaving, so please move.
Tyler managed to pull me away from his sister, but she glared at him as if annoyed by the interruption. What's the big deal?
We're going to be sisters-in-law, it's only right that we talk a bit.
Oh, that's right, Nora, let's exchange contact information since we're family now. Caught off guard by his sister pulling out her phone, I realized I couldn't just refuse as we were going to be family. Eventually, I gave in to her persistence and shared my contact details, but I immediately regretted it. Susie, don't bother Nora too much, even though her mother warned her, she seemed unconcerned and went inside. I finally understood why Tyler had looked so gloomy when Susie was mentioned before. Unlike my husband Tyler, his sister is pushy and doesn't listen to others. She's the complete opposite of my own sister. I'm anxious about whether I can get along with her in the future. However, since we're becoming family, I still want to maintain a good relationship, so when she contacts me, I'll make sure to reply diligently. After exchanging contact details, I started receiving frequent texts from her. During our email exchanges, we discovered our workplaces were close, and one day, she invited me to lunch during a work break. Thinking there was no reason to refuse, I agreed, but when it came time to pay after the meal, Susie exclaimed as if she had just realized something.
What's wrong?
Sorry, Nora. Can you cover for me? I'll pay you back later. Susie didn't seem the least bit embarrassed. Although her behavior was suspicious, I thought it was just the cost of one lunch and covered it for her that day. But then on another day. Oh no, I forgot my wallet. Nora, can you pay for me? Despite repeatedly inviting me to lunch, she began finding excuses to have me pay for her meals. And when I later asked for reimbursement, she'd dismiss it, it's just lunch money, it's not a big deal. Though a single lunch cost wasn't much, the financial burden grew as Susie kept inviting me out. Months passed, and I still hadn't seen any of the money I had covered. My distrust towards her grew day by day. I realized it's best to avoid as much interaction as possible with Susie, and my desire to get along had now faded. Lately, I've been declining lunch invitations with excuses and keeping my replies to a minimum. I tried to cut ties as much as possible, but then one day after work, as Tyler and I were leaving the office, I heard a familiar voice calling my name. Looking in the direction of the voice, there was Susie. She had apparently been waiting for me to finish work. "Leaving work together, you two must be close," she said in a snide tone, causing Tyler to frown. "What do you need?" Tyler asked, and Susie smiled and said, "Actually, I have dinner plans with a friend today, but I'm short on cash. Nora, could you lend me some?" Her actions, as if she had gotten used to them, really put me off. "I refuse. You haven't even paid back the money I lent you before." As soon as I firmly refused, my sister-in-law became sullen and said, "What a cold person you are. Aren't we family? If we're family, a little money shouldn't matter. Besides, you earn more than I do." Actually, I never discussed my salary with her, but she probably figured it out since I work at the same company as Tyler. I wanted to retort that I wasn't even part of your family yet, but Tyler scolded her before I could speak.
Even among families, we shouldn't borrow and lend money, should we? Instead of going to dinner, you should pay back what you owe Nora. If you can't pay it back right now, then please go home. Hey Tyler, who do you think you are talking to like that? I'm your sister. Are you siding with a stranger over your own sister?
Although she had just mentioned family, now she glared at me, calling me a stranger. She continued, "Besides, in today's world, women need to have their own money too. Do you understand, Nora? Saying you can't lend me money is like admitting you're poor." Tyler seemed too exhausted to be angry, just dumbfounded.
What you're saying is nonsense.
Let's go, Nora. Don't take her words seriously. We couldn't bring ourselves to say anything more to her and decided to leave the scene as if we were strangers. People leaving work glanced at us, making us the center of attention.
Wait a minute.
My sister-in-law was shouting behind us, but we didn't look back. Since then, she occasionally contacted me, but I was too busy with wedding preparations, so I kept my replies non-committal. Of course, I also declined her dinner invitations and haven't met her since she ambushed me in front of the company. Meanwhile, the date for the wedding was successfully set, and a dinner with both families was scheduled at my in-laws' home. Shortly after Tyler and I arrived at the in-laws, my parents and sister also arrived. My sister-in-law was there too, and although she greeted us, she surprisingly didn't say much to me and was unusually quiet. While her demeanor felt eerie, the table was set with a lavish meal, and the atmosphere was festive. The dinner ended on a pleasant note, and everyone was happily chatting when suddenly, returning from the restroom, she exclaimed, "What? It's not here. Where is my wallet?" She claimed that the wallet she had put in her bag was missing.
Just calm down. Didn't you leave it in your room?
Her mother suggested, but it seemed not to reach her ears. I definitely put it in my bag. Oh, I get it. You stole it, didn't you? She accused me as she grabbed my bag that was nearby and started rummaging through it. Then, with a look of surprise, she pulled out a wallet from the bag. It was a wallet I had seen her with several times before.
See? I told you so. My wallet was in your bag.
She triumphantly shouted and then confronted me.
You stole it while I was in the restroom, didn't you? Pretending to be so demure, and yet you're such a terrible woman. I oppose you becoming my brother's wife.
Please calm down.
Are you trying to make excuses? What you did is theft. Be prepared because I'm going to demand compensation.
She was so agitated that she wouldn't let me get a word in. But I couldn't help but let out a burst of laughter. As I started laughing, my parents and Tyler also burst out laughing. Before this scene, my sister-in-law was stunned but soon turned red with anger.
What's so funny?
It's so funny. You really said quite something.
Huh?
Confused, the next person to speak to her was my sister sitting next to me.
That bag isn't my sister's. It's mine.
At those words, my sister-in-law's expression froze.
What?
Sweat appeared on her face. I asked, implying confirmation, my sister wouldn't steal your wallet, would she? It turned out that my sister-in-law, Susie, was just waiting for an opportunity to accuse me. Predicting that she might do something, I didn't bring my own bag to the dinner party today. The bag that was near me belonged to my sister, and furthermore, my sister could never do something like steal a wallet. That would be absolutely impossible because since her childhood, she has been unable to move her legs and uses a wheelchair. She can neither stand nor walk on her own. Both the in-laws and Susie had seen my sister come to the dinner in her wheelchair. My sister had been sitting in the same spot since the dinner started, chatting warmly with our parents and the in-laws. It's likely that Susie herself put the wallet in my sister's bag. The question is when exactly Susie managed to slip the wallet into the bag without us noticing.
Susie, before we started eating, you came over to greet me and my parents, right? At that time, I remember you were sitting in such a way that you were hiding my bag behind your back. I felt something was off about your actions, but wasn't that when you put the wallet in?
It was my sister's calm response that helped clear up my doubt. Unable to answer immediately, Susie looked flustered and her eyes darted around. It was as if her reaction was confirming that she was caught red-handed. Cornered and unable to escape, Susie groaned. My sister continued in a calm voice to reason with her.
I had heard about your character from my sister. Despite being nearly the same age as me, the extent of harassment you're willing to go to is just appalling. Please don't hurt my dear sister anymore.
Hearing this, I finally realized that my sister was angry. Although she is usually gentle, she becomes quite intimidating when angry because she speaks in a calm, instructive tone. My in-laws scolded Susie.
Susie, what are you doing? It's disgraceful to call Nora a thief.
Absolutely shameful. We've treated you and Tyler equally. Where did we go wrong in raising you? Nora, everyone, I'm sorry my daughter has done this. My father-in-law apologized to me. However, even seeing her parents apologize didn't seem to affect Susie. The next moment, Susie stood up abruptly and glared at me with fury. What, everyone's making me out to be the bad guy. I've been against your marriage with Tyler from the start. I hoped you'd embarrass yourself today and break up, but you just had to ruin that. Frustrated and speechless at her audacity, Tyler exploded with anger.
Enough. Since we've been listening, it seems you've been trying to worsen our relationship. I can't stand it anymore. I'm going to say everything now. Wait, what are you going to say?
Despite Susie trying to stop him, Tyler, fed up, couldn't be stopped. He revealed all of Susie's past misdeeds, including how she never repaid me for covering her lunch, and how she ambushed me outside our company to beg for money. Tyler added that Susie had been secretly trying to break us up by feeding him baseless accusations against me.
No one would believe such words. I know better. Nora has been hardworking and kind since she joined the company. There's a difference between what you can say as family and what you shouldn't.
Tyler didn't elaborate on what exactly Susie had told him. But from his intense anger, it was clear the rumors were quite nasty.
That really happened?
I was shocked as it was the first time I heard about it, and Tyler looked regretful.
Sorry, I didn't want to worry you unnecessarily, that's why I kept quiet. No matter what my sister says, I believe in you, Nora.
Moved by his earnest words, tears welled up in my eyes. I wiped the tears from my eyes and faced Susie again. I've decided to stand by Tyler no matter what. So please take this opportunity to let go of your brother. Embarrassed, Susie blushed and snapped, "Shut up," before storming out of the house. After the storm had passed, I breathed a sigh of relief. No matter what kind of harassment she plans, I'm not afraid anymore. My love for Tyler deepened through this ordeal. I vowed to continue trusting him and walk together. A few days later, the money for the lunches I had covered for Susie was returned to me through my in-laws. Apparently, they had pressed Susie to prepare the money she owed me. Then, Susie's ex-husband apparently contacted the in-laws. The reason for their divorce was Susie's extravagant spending habits, even going as far as dipping into their living expenses. Because of this, Susie was ordered to pay alimony, and although she told her parents she had finished paying, it turned out a significant amount was still outstanding. Her ex-husband revealed that her repayments had recently fallen behind. Upon learning this, the in-laws lost their patience and disowned her. It seems she had a history of stealing money from home, among other misdeeds towards us. In fact, Susie had not only accrued alimony debts but had also racked up debts from buying branded items and from frequenting nightclubs. Tyler told me that Susie had been into the nightclub scene since her 20s and had often been reprimanded by her parents. Eventually, when she couldn't make ends meet, she even embezzled funds from her place of work, which is just appalling. This also came to light at her company, and she was recently fired for misconduct. Later, I received a call from Susie, who had been kicked out of her home and had lost her job. "I have no one else to turn to but you, Nora. Please, just lend me some money," she begged tearfully, but I refused, of course.
"Isn't this a bit too convenient for you? Please pay off your alimony and debts with money you earn yourself. I don't want to be involved with you anymore." "But, aren't we family? Let's try to get along from now on." I wanted to get along at first, too. But I can't consider someone family who spends recklessly and doesn't think they've done anything wrong.
After I made this clear, Susie continued to rant, but I hung up without paying any attention. Later, I heard that Susie started living frugally in a low-rent place with the little savings she had. However, chased by her debts, she soon had to leave the house, and now, it's unclear where or how she is living. Tyler also said he would never involve himself with Susie again. A month passed, and we held our wedding without Susie's presence. It was a joyous occasion blessed by many, and even now, it remains an irreplaceable memory. After the wedding, we moved into the home we had prepared and soon discovered I was pregnant. Looking forward to the birth of our child, Tyler and I are living fulfilling days. I only hope for happy days ahead with our new